Awesome. I think we are on. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tropicalfete Presents Authors Connecting. It's a cultural reading program in celebration of Caribbean American Heritage Month. And our theme is where heritage meets the written word. So this evening, I am honored to be hosting a conversation with the dynamic and deeply insightful Anna Dao. Hello, Anna, whose
Hello, Petal.
memoir offers an unflinching, a very gentle, tender, layered look into legacy, into loss and grief, identity, and becoming. So, this evening, we're going to go beyond the pages. We have the author here with us into the quiet moments, the memories, the healing. So, hello, Anna. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so excited to be part of this program.
Awesome. So we're going to jump right into this amazing work, Finding Lalla's Anna. And as you introduce yourself to us, I would like you to share with us, when did you know that this book was calling inside you to be written? If the book had a birth date of such, that moment, tell us your story and share that with us.
Thank you so much, Petal. I am originally from Mali, West Africa, and I believe this book has been calling me for the past 20 years as I embrace my role of being a legacy. My grandmother, who was Lalla from my mother's side, was the greatest influence. And she's responsible for making me love storytelling. I grew up listening to her brothers and her sisters, what we call the elders of our community, calling us and saying, "Do you know what's the meaning of this old song? Or do you know the meaning of such and such story?" So there was folk tales every night, and it was intergenerational. The elders, our grandfathers and grandmothers' generations, our fathers and mothers, uncle and aunts, the older brothers and sisters, cousins, and then our generation. And it was an exchange. And they kind of woke our curiosity by asking questions, the whys of everything. If you fight with somebody, why? If their words hurt you, Petal, why did this word trigger you? Right? And coming up with the answer, then would come the advice of, I would have done it this way. But it was never something that was imposed. It was always an advice, but after listening to your own thought process and kind of offering you an alternative to how you do things.
That's awesome. And it's great that you felt that, huge responsibility that there are stories and there's a legacy and a heritage in there, and you responded to that and shared that with us. The book covers some really comforting themes, and there's also some themes about identity and autonomy. At one point in the text, you wrote that even from the grave, she was still controlling me. So that's a powerful statement. And how did that moment that you recognize that sentiment shape or reshape your understanding of grief and healing?
It's an act of love. When in my during my turbulent many years ago youth and adolescence, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know if I were going or if I were coming, as I didn't seem to be successful at anything particular. I was failing in a few things like math and science and other things that kind of make you feel important. And when I didn't know what was going to, because everybody was asking a question, what is it that you're going to do with your life? How are you, what kind of adult are you going to be? You're not focused enough on anything. We know that you're intelligent, but you're not making any effort. And so she was the one voice who kept telling me, you're going to be okay. And don't worry, until I know that you're okay, I will never leave. And even when I'm no longer here, if you come to a point, whenever you come to a crossroads and you don't know what to do, just call my name.
Wow.
And it is that comfort of knowing that transition is really that. Death is not dying, it's leaving this space where the world of the senses touches and put things in frame to another dimension, but remains a mystery for the rest of us. And then from there, you have this guardian angel that kind of watching over you and reassuring you. And I still have dreams of my grandmother whenever things get a little bit too tough. And I'm like, and so there is this comforting voice that comes and says, didn't I tell you that you're going to be okay? What is your gut telling me, telling you? And Petal is also how I learned to really trust my gut and how I learned to embrace the presence of God
That's
away from
amazing.
the dogma, away from the books, but just have this personal relationship, but it's being nourished by my questions, but sometimes my doubts, but my anger, because God is unconditional love. And what was the most difficult for me to understand is that there was nothing that I could ever do that would make God love me less. That's a concept that was totally foreign to me. So coming to that and embracing that, I think kind of also enlightened my own compassion towards other people.
That's really powerful. And, sometimes we take for granted those very intimate, very bonding conversations that we have with our elders or with other family members. But they leave a lasting legacy, right? The
Yes.
life lessons. I thought it was very interesting when you talked about listening to my convictions and also listening to your doubts, because identity, as an immigrant, or as a citizen of the world traveling from country to country, you have to be intentional about defining your own identity. Otherwise, others will define it for you, right?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
you've lived in places, you go to one place, they say you sound very American. You go to another place, they say you sound very, Caribbean. So, as someone who grew up with strict cultural expectations, I felt that tug of war between preserving my identity and still blending into the norms of wherever I lived. Tell me about that. You've traveled the world. How were those experiences for you?
It was what you call it, a step by step thing. Initially, I wanted to be everything except Malian. I wanted to blend in. I was in the popular because, thank God, it doesn't show right now, but I do have a sense of humor at times. And so I got that from my mother, that quick sense of just replying and finding something witty in the difficult situations. So in school, I was always a funny girl. And I liked that image because it shielded me from a lot of things, right?
Yes.
It shields you from being unpopular. It shields you from explaining for bad grade or not making enough effort, whatever is what you feel is weird about you. When you're funny, it covers that, because when you become popular because you are a funny person that people go to for laugh, except when people stop laughing with you and start laughing at you because you went overboard. And then, because of the expectations of the family, in terms of you must become something
Yes.
without defining what that something is, something basically meaning that it's material. It is that title that you have in the office. It is that number of dollars that you have in front of the dollar signs. It's the car that you have in front of your house. It's the apartment in the neighborhood that you live in, right? So I had all this image where I was going to be this successful person that was going to show everybody who ever doubted my abilities. But listen, I am an ambitious woman. So I tried the different steps, as you have seen in the book, of be patient, work hard, you know, challenges or just delay, and it's God challenging me. But everything that I did, which is funny because, well, it's funny and sad, but a teaching moment. For more than 20 years, I did things to attain the status that was never meant to be mine, but was never
Yes.
mine. And so, what do you think? What do you think happened? I crashed because I wasn't getting where I thought I was going. I was supposed to go. I didn't know why I wasn't getting there. Frustration built up, doubt built up, religion became something that I resented and went through break crash happened. I had lost my job. It was the year, remember that year when we had the housing crisis?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So just a
2000.
few months after that, Patel, I lost my job, no income coming in, and I was probably in my late 30s or maybe early 40s at that time. And you can imagine, with everybody looking for a job, with a number of people that were out there taking jobs that were less than what they used to take in, what was my fate? And people younger than I, a generation younger than I, was coming up and trying to also was also on the job market. So how do you find your place there,
Yes.
right? How do you where do you start from? And so that's when I was breaking and I had one moment where I said, you know what? Yes, I'm ashamed. Yes, I'm a failure, but let me call Lalla. Because that was one person that never saw me as harshly as I saw myself, or
Wow.
didn't define me as over defined me, right? The funny girl, and she was like, "Life is not tough, you are." And I'm like, "I didn't call you for that. I didn't say that. I said that in my mind, but I didn't dare say it out loud, right? Because the elder is the elder, and even though there are oceans between you, you know what you can say and what you cannot say." And she was like, "No, pursuit," and I love that, and I keep telling it to everyone. Patel, pursuit has two purposes, either to find wealth or to find yourself. What did you find
Yeah. That's
and
so
why?
beautiful. Right.
So the whys kind of forced me to stop looking for outside validation and turn the attention within to kind of figure out who am I in the scheme of things?
Yeah.
What am I? Why am I here? Why am I pursuing the things that I'm pursuing? And for what purpose? What am I going to try to prove? And to who am I trying to prove these things to? It was painful. And the hardest thing, believe it or not, Patel, was not knowing when it would end, because that forced me to give up control. That forced me to accept that the uncertainty of life is something that we go with. There's no such thing as certitude.
Right.
You are in this moment. You own this moment, but you don't own the next, and the next is not promised to any of us. That was a battle.
Yes. That's really powerful. And what is resonating with me is when you said that even though I saw myself as broken and burnt out and a failure, you went to someone who you knew didn't see you that way. It's like you saw a reflection of yourself in that person, and that is very powerful. We are, really a huge support for the people around us in our words, in our affirmations, in our positive thinking. And on that note, in the book, Anna, you were very vulnerable about your pains and your struggles. And you said that in one moment, you said, "What if this was my spiritual lesson?" And I stopped and I paused because it's very difficult for people who are going through something that is dark and unpleasant to see it as possibly being positive for them in the long run, right? They see it as a negative situation. Where did you find the strength to be that hopeful that things were going to turn around in the text?
Because I always believe that tomorrow will be better. I didn't need a reason. I was, and this is the thing, actually, Patel, where I would like to give homage to those who came before me. My grandmother, my father, my late mother, my late uncle, because as you saw in the book, I went through a lot. I am, it was generational pain. And I believe that I'm the generation that broke the cycle.
It's wonderful.
All the people that I felt hurt me, it was never intentional. That's how they learn to react. And within, if you look at the way they acted, the harsh words, or you'll never amount to anything, to then listen say, but you are so intelligent, you can do anything that you want. This is fear on their part, because I am a reflection of them. And because they were, all of them had struggled to be a success story, to prove to their own environment that they were a success, they couldn't fathom. It was, I was supposed to, they had passed on the baton to the next generation, myself and my sisters and brothers, and I'm the one who is trailing behind. And that pain, even though I was in pain, even though I was angry, I never doubted the love. And that's when you realize that love is messy.
Yes.
The people who love you the most can be your harshest critics and hurt you the most out of their own unresolved pain.
Yeah, and that's, I hear you and I totally agree with that. And when you talk about the pain and the fear that allowed the language to be used, that is very anxiety provoking, right? It's a stress response. So in your writing, you kept returning again and again to the body and breath and breathing and reclaiming it. What is the connection between that and your storytelling?
The connection is, I'm going to give you an old proverb that Lalla used to tell me. You have looked to the outside world to find answers to your own journey. But tell me, if I were to ask you the question, Patel, since you and I are having this wonderful conversation, right?
Yes.
What you have learned from others, is it worth what you're ignoring of your own, the treasure that you are ignoring within your own self?
It's not, and I've learned that lesson because the expectations of others, as you described in the text, becomes a burden. You
Exactly.
know, if you are silencing your own inner voice and you are struggling to fulfill all these varying expectations that may not match your destiny, and that can be extremely stressful. And I completely endorse what you're saying. I can feel that.
And so when I started looking internally, I had to come up with the whys of why didn't I see myself worthy? Why didn't I see beauty within myself? Why was I shy of smiling or laughing?
Wow.
Why was I why was I always goofing around? What was the purpose of always goofing around? And that low self-esteem, because it was that low self-esteem stemmed from the fact that I have always been a dynamic woman. I've always been kind of tomboyish, but I always felt comfortable in my skin. Other people have a problem with had a problem with maybe how I appear, but I was okay. And what is extraordinary is that my grandmother saw that.
Wow.
She told me her good thing. And so it was then trying to find and becoming for myself my own good thing. And in doing so, turning it and going through, because each label came with a scene, a childhood scene. This is why we say who you were began where you were. So it took me back to where I was in terms of a child that was disappointing at times, and then the disappointment translated to angry words from my elders. Because to them, that was to boost my ego and to make me want to do better.
Right.
It had the adverse effects. it made me want to become smaller and smaller till I became non-existent in my own eyes. So to come from that place of non-existence to come to exude what I hope I exude now is kind of a woman who is good in her own skin, who finds
Yes.
beauty in herself, who is okay, who can speak confidently to people. Sometimes sense of humor, but not always. But I love that. And it's becoming the Lalla, it's becoming the Anna that my grandmother saw.
Yeah.
It's getting the potential, right? And so, and coming, going inside and making peace with all these pain and suppressed anger and pain also kind of put in front of me the question, Lord, who is God and what is God and where in the world is God?
It's awesome. And I love that you said earlier on that you felt that you broke that generational curse, right? We benefited from the advice and the love, even the errors of those before us, right? We take their mistakes and it shapes us to be stronger.
Yes.
And now, go ahead,
No, no, no. I was going to say, I just wanted to share with you one beautiful moment that
please do.
I had with my father, actually. One day I was in Mali and we were sitting down and he had been sick, and we had this ritual where every morning after breakfast it was just the two of us sitting and talking. And for some reason that day he opened up about his own childhood and the pain that he had, some of the pain that he had gone through. And at one point, looking at him, I didn't see my father. I saw the vulnerability and the image of a 11-year-old
The inner
because
child.
the pain was exactly the pain was still there. And Patel, something beautiful happened because at that point I became the protector, the parent, and he became my papa.
And
That's what I wanted to share.
that's oh my God, that has me. I feel that because what is beautiful about that story is that you validated that inner child, right? You saw the pain of his childhood, but it
Yes.
didn't make you see him as less of a person. You still
No.
respected who he was as your father, and you
Yes.
validated that pain, and that is so
Yes.
powerful.
Yes.
And we need to do more of that when and be more empathetic when people share with us pains that they've been holding on for a long, long time. You know,
Yes.
sometimes we become impatient and we think that time heals all wounds. It's a saying, but is it actually true if you're not facing those struggles, right?
Yes.
So, as people who have benefited from our ancestral heritage, there's a new generation of young people. I'm an educator. When you were describing yourself using humor and to mask that pain and identity, that is a perfect description for the students I see in my classroom every day, right? And I have to remind myself that this person who is interrupting the lessons, the child who is looking for attention, really has something deeper going on, right?
Yes.
So for readers who are young, especially teens, right? They're struggling with adolescence and the changes they're going through. A lot of them feel unloved or misunderstood by a parent. What would you want them to hear? If they were listening to this live or if they read the text, what is the message?
We are all unique, number one. And number two, I love the fact that you're an educator because I feel that today I too have a calling and a responsibility. I have a responsibility towards all these young people to make sure that I engage in conversations where basically I we talk about the heroes and the people who make a difference in our own environment. I have nothing against celebrities, Patel, but somebody had to survive and thrive for you and me and everybody else to be here today. So maybe have them, teach them, or go through the process of having, looking at yourself with kinder eyes, because kindness starts with ourselves. If you don't exercise kindness toward yourself, I have doubts that the kindness that you extend to others is going to be genuine. So see how far you have come. Because the fact that you wake up, you go to school in a certain environment that might be very challenging is a testament to your own resilience. So, in celebrating that, celebrate the people who make it possible for each child to wake up. And despite what is going on in their individual life, make sure that that child goes to school and learn something. And
Yes.
I think valuing that, seeing the uncle, yes, he might have all kind of, I don't know, he might have some issues, but still, he's the one who gives you $20 for your birthday. That's something that redeems for whatever else is lacking, right? He might not be there every day, but the person showed up for your birthday, the person showed up for your graduation. Be grateful for the small things. Learn to appreciate that the people who show up actually had a choice and chose you. That's how important you are to them. And I think in building their confidence and making sure that they feel important, that's why you keep showing up. That might change how they perceive themselves and how they perceive the world.
I completely agree. I love that you said to pay attention to the little things. In the classroom, we say sweat the small stuff. So
Yes.
we attempt to recognize every single victory, every small step. You know, there was once a student was standing outside of my classroom door and I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" He said, "I don't want to be here." And I said, "But you are. But
Yes.
you are here and you're here on time.
Yeah.
You're standing outside the classroom before the bell rang." And so his eyes, lit up and he recognized, wait a minute, I did do that. I am here on time despite the fact that I don't want to be here. So Anna, as we
Yes.
come to close, this was such a great conversation,
I loved
right?
it.
It was wonderful and so insightful. As we come to a close, uh, you felt so many things, you experienced a lot, and you wrote all of this into a book as a gift to your audience, right? When children express struggles to me, I often say, write it down. This is 2025. Kids have a phone in their hand, they're texting, they're using abbreviated, a letter for a word. So, in attempting to bring children back to translating those thoughts into writing when they express frustration or they disagree with the school rule, I say write it down.
Yes.
So after you wrote something as intimate and as layered as this, is there something such as closure? Is that a real word? What has been the therapy for you after putting all of that into this text?
Closure is such a big word because it makes it as if it's finished, where basically you continue to, it's a process. And what I'm, first of all, it did healing. And then it made me see what I never saw, vulnerability in my elders, their own fears. I think I want to believe that it made me a more loving and compassionate person. And also, it gave me the burden of a legacy, which is okay, with this wealth of knowledge, what is it that you are going to do? Because now you have a responsibility towards the next generation. So, what is your role? And that's what I actually am calling my second act, because more and more I feel that this book can translate into a message but I can actually help me start a conversation with secondary school, high school, and maybe first year of colleges when when young people are trying to figure out where they are going, what is happening, just to kind of tell them, slow down. It's okay to not know. Not know is a part of life,
Yes.
because that's where your question should come in. Instead of beating yourself up for not knowing, ask yourself why. Why do you want to know, and what is it that you want to know? Sharpen that. Be curious about your own instinct. Be curious about your own wants. Be curious about your own desires. Don't look so much at what your friends are doing. What they are doing is great. It's great for them. But it's not about them. This is about you. This is your journey. And there's no right or wrong way We all make mistakes. Some are graver than others, but ultimately, what I love, I guess, in my conversation with God is to be able to talk about unconditional love that makes even the worst crime redeemable.
That is amazing, Anna. Your words are so freeing. They're so liberating. Thank you so much. I'm going to take a lot of what you said and take it right back to my classroom, to my students, because they need to hear that from another voice, you know? So thank you so much, not only for sharing your story between the pages of this amazing book,
Thank you
but for
so much.
allowing us, the rest of us, to feel it, for teaching us how to open our hearts, how to mend our wounds, and to remind us that even in the brokenness, there is beauty and there is strength.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much,
My
Anna. This
pleasure.
was
And thank you
amazing.
so much.
Yeah, you are
You're
welcome.
amazing. And
Thank
I
you.
really love meeting you. This was
Yes.
great.
And we will have to
Great
do this
energy.
again. I'm getting a feeling this might not be
I
our
agree
final
because
time.
I love what you're doing. And it's part of my next step that I'm working on. So it'll
Awesome.
be, like I said, I'll stay in touch, Patel. It was
Yes,
such
we
a pleasure
will.
meeting.
You too, Anna. And to our audience, this brings us to our final and fifth installment of Authors Connecting, our cultural reading program. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Take care.